Hey Maker, on January 24th of 2024, Etsy released a new feature called gift mode. Immediately, my inbox was flooded with questions about what aspect ratios sellers should now be using for their photos. Because if you scroll through the new feature, you'll notice a variety of new shapes. If you want to learn how this new feature will affect your photos, this video is for you. If this is your first time joining me, my name is Christina Nicole, and I am a product photography coach teaching makers like you how to take your own high quality product photos that actually attract more customers and make more sales for your product-based business. So, quick disclaimer before we get started. I want to let you know that this video is going to be a little different from the YouTube videos that I usually make. Think of it as being a little more candid in a conversation between friends. Keep in mind, while I provide my recommendation as far as what aspect ratio you should be using, the more important element of all of this is to get you to understand how Etsy is going to crop your photos depending on what aspect ratio you use. I have makers that use square, 4:3, 5:4. That's totally fine as long as you understand how Etsy is going to crop your photos across the entire platform and try to avoid your product actually getting cut out of that display thumbnail. Prior to the release of this new feature, gift mode, Etsy was displaying your product photos in 3 different aspect ratios: 4:3, 5:4, and square, depending on where at within Etsy and depending on what device you were using. Sadly, my testing did reveal that Etsy is using 4 additional aspect ratios within the gift mode feature. So that brings us to a total of 7 aspect ratios that we're now supposed to account for when it comes to uploading our product photos. What does this mean for you? Well, before we dive in, let's check out what Etsy is telling us about the new gift mode feature. So here is an article that Etsy has released in regards to optimizing your listings for gifting on Etsy. I will link this article in the description below because I'm not going to cover all of it. We're going to scroll down to photography and we're going to see what recommendations they have for optimizing your listings for gift giving with photography. First, they say to choose an eye-catching first listing video. They say the photo should clearly show the item that's for sale and be eye-catching enough that the buyers want to take a closer look. Second, use all 10 photo slots. Use simple backgrounds and staging to illustrate the story behind your product. Props help to give your item context, enabling customers to better visualize how they might use it in the future or share it as a gift. So if you offer gift wrapping or branded packaging, be sure to include a shot to incentivize one-stop shoppers. And third, show off your products by adding a listing video. So all of these are things that we should already be doing to optimize our listings. I'm not seeing really any significant changes here. If you offered your product or if your product was purchased a lot for gifts in the past, you should already be showing your gift wrapping, your branded packaging. Those are things that set you apart from sellers. So these are all things that you should have been doing. I'm not seeing anything new here. Now, Etsy does have some events coming up that are going to focus a little bit on this new feature. I'll share the link for this in the description below, but there is a virtual event photographing your giftable listings. Make sure you get on the list for this. I myself will be watching this as well, and I'm interested to see what information they're going to talk about. So let's check out this new gift mode feature. So if we go into Etsy on a browser on a PC or Mac, you're going to have the option to shop gift mode up here and also over here. If you're looking at this on a mobile device, it'll be in the bottom menu. So if we click in, we have the option of choosing who we are shopping for. Okay, I want to shop for my friend. And let's do it just because. I'm a just because kind of person. The style, home. plants and animals. Let's show gift ideas. Okay, so it brings up basically categories. So the interior designer. These right here are being displayed in a 5:4 aspect ratio, so no concerns there. The plant parent, the fashionista, the friend. So these are some pretty cool suggestions here. On the browser here in my Mac, we're not really seeing any issues thus far. Okay, as I mentioned, this is a 5:4 aspect ratio. But on a smartphone, this is actually how that section looks. So we are getting some odd crops here when we go to use GIF mode on a smartphone, which again, 67% of people are shopping Etsy via the app in their smartphones. Now, if we click into show all ideas on the Mac, here's where we're noticing some changes in the aspect ratios. Now, I will say there's a couple things that I noticed here. All of these are sectioned off and they look identical, okay? Couple things to keep in mind here. Per each section, the photos really like fit well. And we're seeing a lot of neutral. Sometimes we have an oddity where we've got a darker background here. But if you look up here, we're seeing a lot of neutral stuff. Here's an oddity with some dark. But my recommendation to you is go and search like a category that's relevant to your type of product that you sell and really take note of what types of photos are being selected. Now, as I mentioned before, the categories on mobile, they do have some odd aspect ratios versus the 5:4 we're seeing in the browser. But if you actually click into the show all ideas, we get this kind of formatting on mobile. So we're seeing some verticals, we're seeing some other aspect ratios. So we'll dive into that here in a minute as well. Now, this one's kind of interesting to me because it very much looks, a lot of these look very similar. We definitely have like a little bit of floral greenery and a lot of, we've got the neutral backgrounds going on. These all like the aesthetic in each of these sections or categories, whatever they're calling them, very much kind of fits. This one's kind of an oddity. And we mentioned before that that one was kind of an oddity. I want to tell you a little bit about my process and how I go about testing all of this. So initially what I do is I take screenshots on my actual computer and on my smartphone device, and then I pull them into an editing software. So once I'm in the software, what I do is I just test the crop. So I go to the crop tool and I already know based on looking at this that it's a 5:4. But we're going to go in here and we're going to pull it and there you go. So all of these are actually showing as a 5:4 aspect ratio. Again, this was kind of like the category section within the browser on my Mac. Now, if I go to that same section on mobile, it's going to look a little different. So we can tell that these are a square. And if you want to confirm that, all you have to do is a 1x1. Because sometimes our eyes can play tricks on us, okay? But this one here, this is a vertical. We don't see verticals too often. And this is actually a 3:4. Okay, so this is a new aspect ratio that we're going to have to consider. Now, if I click into show all ideas on a browser and I hit crop, we're going to notice again that we have a square. Square here, square here. So we got 4 squares happening. We also have a 3:2. So a 3:2 is a new one that we're going to have to consider. Okay. And we've got 4 3:2s. Now, if we go to show all ideas within the app on mobile, again, we're seeing different aspect ratios. Now, this is where it gets very weird and very frustrating. So we do have a 3-2. So I kind of already talked about that. That was one of our additional ones. We've got 2 of those. Down a little bit there. And while this kind of looks like a square, it isn't quite a square. So if we pull in a square, look at the residual on the right there. Same with here. So this one's going to be super weird. This is the 1 by 1.16. Nope, that's this one. Sorry. Okay, so we have a 1.16. This one that kind of looked like a square, this was actually a 5 by 4.5. So again, we are contending with 2 more additional. So I've covered 4 additional aspect ratios that we may, need to take into consideration when we're uploading our photos to Etsy. So prior to gift mode being released, we were working with 3 aspect ratios: 4:3, 5:4, and square. My recommendation to you was to use a 4:3 aspect ratio, okay? While keeping your product within the center to account for that square crop. So this is a 4:3 aspect ratio. So when Etsy goes to crop it to a 5:4 for search on Apple devices, only thing that's going to get cut out is this tiny, tiny portion on the left and right. When Etsy goes to crop your photo to account for search on the browser and your shop homepage across the board, that's going to be a square. So everything out here and out here is going to get cut out. That's why my recommendation is to use a 4:3 while keeping your product in the center to account for the square crop. Let's check out cropping after gift mode, now accounting for 7 different aspect ratios. This is what we're looking at. Don't freak out. I'm going to explain it all. So this center square right here is the only aspect of this photo that's going to be safe across the board. If we go back to what we were working with before, it's restricting, it's closing in. Right now, what I want to show you, because I know not everyone is using a 4:3 aspect ratio. 4:3 and square seem to be the most common that I see, but I want you to understand how Etsy is going to crop your photo, how it's going to affect your product being in the frame based on how you choose to upload. So this is a 4:3 aspect ratio. If you upload using a 5:4, let me go back to 4:3. Here's our 5:4. Looks like we're getting a little bit more cut off the top and bottom. The left and right is still the same. And this is why, this is right here is a great example of why I recommend a 4:3. You go back to a 4:3, we have less being accounted or less being cut top and bottom. So in doing this, not only does your product get to be larger in that thumbnail, you don't have to account necessarily for all 4 sides previously, right? We didn't have to account for the top and bottom. We only had to account for the left and right with a 4:3. But even now seeing the 4:3 to the 5:4, we're losing more of the top and bottom with the 5:4, but our sides left and right are staying the same. Here's the kicker. I know that last year when Etsy started displaying all of our shop homepages as square, they were doing testing in search, which is interesting because I haven't seen a lot of square testing in search over the past couple months. A lot of people freaked out, changed all of their photos to square, and some people are still using square or were using square before, and this is what you need to understand. Square creates the most issues. Square, this portion here, if you choose to upload your images as a square, this portion here is the only portion that is going to be safe across the board. So we're not seeing any change left to right again, but we're seeing significant changes top and bottom. So, what does all of this mean for you? What steps should you take next? So, first off, I don't want you to freak out and think that you have to change all of your photos. The first thing we need to consider and really think about is how many people are actually going to utilize this new feature. So, Starlet and Mark, share data all the time from eRank, and a lot of the data just shows that shoppers are using keywords to search. They're not really going to categories, that they're not really browsing those types of categories. They're going to Etsy, they're using keywords in the search bar, and that's how they're shopping. Starla and Mark also mentioned that I think the statistics are showing that more people on Etsy are shopping for themselves versus shopping for gifts. The percentage was much higher. Okay. So we have to keep that in mind. I don't see myself utilizing this feature at all. I don't know about you. But when I go to Etsy, I typically have something very specific in mind that I'm looking for. So I just take it right to search. I've never used the categories. I don't see myself using the gift mode. So consider that, because the most important thing that we need to think about here is we need to make sure we are optimizing our listings for where the most people are going to be. We want to optimize for where people are hanging out within the app. And to this day, I still believe that's going to be search. And then followed second is going to be those shop home pages. So my recommendation is still the 4:3 aspect ratio while keeping your product within that center square crop. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And please take the time to like this video if you found it useful. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to learn more about taking your own high quality product photos. See you next time.